Alright guys, MTech Guy here, and today we're going to be working on the E53 X5. Now if you subscribe to my channel, you will have seen that I put a community post out just recently. I'd experienced a failed window regulator. It was that front left door and the window had actually dropped right down. Now this is a super common problem on these vehicles. If it's not the window regulators failing, it's the door handles breaking. So if you do find that you go to operate one of your windows and it gets stuck or it drops right down and you can't get it back up again, then 9 times out of 10 it's your window regulator that's failed. Now I don't know if you can make out on the video here, but I have a small suction cup holding that window open at the moment. That's just a small repair I carried out just so I could use the vehicle in the meantime while I was waiting for parts to arrive. I've had to order them out of North America. The parts are finally here. I have done a previous video on that quick repair. I'll put a link at the top of the screen here and I'll also link it in the description below. So if you do find yourself in a similar position, you can just do that quick repair to get yourself by until you get round to doing the proper fix, which we're going to look at today. But anyway, let's take a look at what parts are required to get the job done. Alright, so here we have the new window regulator, and of course this part is specific to the front left door. So what I'll do is I'll leave the part numbers for the front left and the front right window regulators in the description below. Now this is a VDO branded one I've got here, and from experience you're best off going for either genuine BMW VDO brand or the Febby Bilstein brand. There are a lot of cheap alternatives out there. You often find them on Amazon, eBay, but from my experience I've tried them in the past and they wouldn't work quite right, and then I've had to pull them out and put a proper one in there. So you might think you're saving money in the short term, but it's going to bite you in the ass, so you might as well just go for one of them 3 brands and you should have good luck with them. And as well as the window regulator, it is worth picking up a couple of these clips. If you're doing the front window regulators, you want 2 of these, so I'll leave a link in the description below for these also, because it's likely that these will be broken once you get in there. Alright, so let's get stuck into the job and run through the steps required to get your window regulator replaced. Alright, so first things first, because once we get the door card off we're going to have to disconnect the airbag. We want to make sure we disconnect the battery before we do anything. So to gain access to the battery we need to remove the spare wheel, and then we need to undo the air compressor that's underneath, lift that out of the way, and then that'll give us access to that battery. Alright, so now that we've got the spare wheel out of the way, I'm ready to undo this frame that's holding the air compressor, and then that'll allow me to lift it out of the way and gain access to the battery. So it's just 4 bolts holding this down. They take a 13mm socket. There's 1, 2 there, and then 1 in the back corner there, and the same over on that side. And now we've got access to the battery. Next job, we'll disconnect that negative terminal, and then we're going to tuck it right out the way to make sure that it doesn't bounce back, creep back on the cable and hit the terminal. So you want to make sure that that's tucked nicely out the way so there's no chance of it reconnecting. Now to undo the battery terminal, we're going to be using a 10mm socket. Now as you can see, I've got that negative terminal tucked right out the way of the battery there. Now I've got the lower tail door just closed up at the moment, but it won't latch because it works off an electric solenoid. Now I'm going to make sure that I leave the main tailgate, the boot, open. Now if you do decide to close it while you're carrying out this repair, just make sure you stuff a rag or something over the top of the clasp here, because what can happen is if it latches you won't get it undone again. It works off a solenoid, you need the battery to be connected to open it up, so just be aware of that. Alright, so now that we've got the battery disconnected, we're ready to remove the door card itself. Now this is held on by several Torx bolts. There's one hidden behind this airbag logo here, there's some behind this wooden trim here, and there's one just hiding down here inside the door pocket there. So to start off with, I'm going to use a plastic trim removal tool to pry off this wooden trim piece here. I'm going to start at the rear end and we're just going to pop it off. It's just held on with some clips, and then when you get to the far end here near the door handle, you just want to pull it out like that because it's just sort of clipped into this plastic piece here. You can see we've got our Torx bolt there. And next we'll pop out this small airbag tab. That gives us access to another Torx bolt in there. So now we're ready to remove the Torx bolts, and these take a T20 Torx tool. So now we're ready to pry the door card away from the door itself. Going to be using another plastic pry tool. Now this is held on by several plastic clips around the perimeter and the two sides there, and then it's just clipped in with metal clips along the top there. So do take your time just prying it away. I like to start in the bottom corner there and just work my way around from the bottom and then up the sides. So now I've got the bottom and the two sides disconnected, just the top to do. Now do be aware that when you do pull that away, you've got several electrical connectors on the back side of the door, so before you pull it right away, you're just going to have to hold it there and get in and disconnect all them electrical connectors. And there's also a cable that goes on the back of the door handle there. Alright, so as you can see, we've now got the door card removed, and I'll just run through the bits and pieces here that you need to disconnect. So to start off with, you've got the cable here for the door handle. That's nice and easy. That just levers out like that, pulls straight out. You can do that by hand. And you've got the wee light here for your door handle. That's just two clasps either side, and that pulls straight out. And then you've got these three connectors here for the window switch. Now these two skinny ones, the black and the white one, it's just a case of levering these flaps down and pulling it out. And this big rectangle one here, you've got to slide this bottom piece out, this rectangle piece, slide that out away from the connector, and then it lifts straight out. And then the last one, this light that goes on the bottom of the door card, I find it easier just to unclip this and feed it through the hole rather than trying to disconnect this little clip. When you're holding everything, it does make life a little bit easier. So next up, we're ready to remove the airbag, and that's held on by 3 bolts here. They take a 10mm socket, and then again, once you get that so far away from the door, there is an electrical connector to pull apart there also. So we've now got the airbag disconnected, and if we take a look at the connector here, you can see it's got this black plastic square on the back there, and it's just a case of getting down the top of it there with a thin flat blade pocket screwdriver. Just pop that back, the whole lot slides back, and then that allows you to disconnect the connector from the airbag. And do be gentle and careful with the airbag. Set it aside somewhere where it's not going to get damaged, because keep in mind that it is an explosive device. So once that's out of the way, next job is we need to remove this foam back in here. Now this is held on by some kind of butanol product. It's like a putty, so we're going to go around with a putty knife and just slowly separate that. Try not to tear it. You can see someone's been in here before and it's received a bit of damage, so I might tape that up. Once we're finished, you can buy these and you can replace it if you need to. So I'm going to grab my knife and then just go carefully around the edge there and get that all pried away, and then that'll give us access to the window regulator. Okay, so you can now see that we've got the door foam peeled back, and here's that horrible black sticky putty stuff that holds it on. Now you can reuse this if you do find that it is all messed up with dust and dirt and it's not sticking, and you can replace it, but the most part I've found that it'll just stick right back on there. You want to create a nice weather seal when you do come to refit it. That's the knife that I used just to tease it off there, and just be super careful, try not to tear this best you can. Now, in an effort to disrupt as little of this weather seal as possible, I've only peeled back what I need here, so you just need access to this opening here, and then also around the front here, just in there too, so that's it. Righto, so next up we need to disconnect the glass from the window regulator itself, and to do that we need to lower the glass down until you see the mounting bolts just showing through these openings here. There's one here and one the same on the front section. So this window regulator is made up of 2 bars like this one here, one at the front. So I'll remove my suction cup now and just ease the window down until that lines up, and then we'll look at removing them bolts. Now we've got the window positioned about 2/3 of the way down there, and as you can see we've got that bolt that holds the glass lined up with this opening here, and it's the same on the front rail too. So this takes a 8mm socket, and then once you've undone these 2 bolts, that'll disconnect the glass from the window regulator itself. Now, depending on what state your window regulators have failed, you might have difficulty maneuvering the glass down by hand. So what I found I had to do was reconnect the battery, and I've reconnected the window switch here, pulled it out the door card. You can even use the one on the driver's door, and I had to use that just to maneuver it down to line it up with the opening here. Now, you can do this before you start the job, but it's impossible to line this up with the door card in place. And once you've done this, do be mindful of the fact that you need to disconnect that battery again, because of course we're going to be refitting our airbag later on, so we don't want any current going through there. So just remember, as soon as you've done this, disconnect that battery again. Okay, and before we disconnect these 2 bolts that take an 8mm socket, I've positioned my suction cup here to hold the glass, because of course once you've disconnected it from the window regulator, there's nothing holding it, and it'll drop down, and then it's quite difficult to reconnect it in position. So that'll hold the glass just where we want it. Okay, so we've now got the first bolt removed, and just be aware that on the back of the plastic clip in the window glass itself, there's a small captive nut, and these love to drop down. Once you've removed that bolt, they'll drop down, and then they get lost in the bottom of the door here, and you'll have a nightmare of a time trying to fish it out again. So just be aware of that to save yourself a bit of a headache. Get your hand behind there and get hold of it, pull it out by hand. So now we've got that one removed. Next up, got the one at the front here, and you can see that's lined up nicely with the opening, so it's the same again with that one. Alright, so now that we've got the glass disconnected from the window regulator itself, it's now time to disconnect the window regulator from the door frame. And it's made up of a section here, and then the same at the front there also. Now there's 4 nuts to remove. They take a 10mm socket. There's one hiding up here, one down there, and then the front section, one up the top there, and then the last one down in the bottom corner here. So once we've got them 4 nuts removed, I'm then going to take the rear section first and feed it out the door like that, and it's all joined by cables to the front section, and then draw that out at the same time. And once you've got the 4 bolts undone, then you've got to remove this electrical connector from the window motor itself, just by pushing down on the back of the clasp there, pull it straight off. And then there's one more 10mm nut here, that's holding the motor, which is attached to the window regulator, to the door frame, so that needs to be removed also, in able to slide everything out. Okay, so that's the old window regulator out. Now it is a tight squeeze feeding it out of here. Like I say, start off with this section first, pull it out like that, and then the rest to follow. You need to get your hand up in there and separate it from the door and feed it out. Now you might find it easier to lift the glass up by hand and hold it in position with the suction cup, and that's going to give you much more room to get it out, but even with all that room, it is a tight squeeze. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the 2 window regulators laid out here. I've got the new one on a section of cardboard here, and this VDO branded one did actually come with the 2 window clips there, so that's super cool, but it isn't always the case when you order these window regulators. So I've got them laid out like for like, and I've got them flipped over so the motor is on the underside of the regulator. And what I'm going to do next is disconnect that motor and refit it to the new window regulator, and that's just held on by 3 bolts there that take a T30 Torx tool. So it's a case of just removing the 3 bolts, pry that away from the window regulator itself, and then refit it to the new one. Okay, so we've now got the window motor transferred to the new window regulator, and it's all fully bolted up. So the last thing to do with this before we transfer it to the car is there's a small clip here on the cable that just clips it to the inner sheet metal of the door. So we'll remove that, clip it on the new one. Alright, so next up, before we feed the new window regulator and install it inside the door frame there, we first need to fit our new plastic clips to the glass. So it's worth getting your hands up in there and remove the old ones or the remnants of the old ones. It's likely that they're broken. They go that way up. So fit them to the new glass and then get your hand around the back of the glass and push that captive nut back in and make sure it's nice and secure. And then once that's in place, you're ready to feed the regulator back into position. Alright, so we've now got the new regulator bolted into place, and I've bolted the glass back onto the new regulator. So we've got the 5 mounting nuts back in place. I've reconnected the electrical connector to the window motor, refitted the little plastic clip here for the cable, and then of course I've bolted the glass back to the window regulator here. And again, you've got to be careful with these bolts, that one and the one hidden in there, because you just want to watch that you're not going to push that captive nut back out. So again, just get your hand behind there, hold it in place while you get the new bolt back in position. So next up, I'm going to refit the door foam back in position, make sure it's nicely sealed around the edge, and then we can refit the door card. Right then, that's the door foam back in position, and then we're ready to refit the airbag and plug her back in. Okay, so that's the airbag refitted. We've got the electrical connector plugged back in and the 3 bolts back in position there, all fully tightened up. So next up, we're ready to refit the door card, and of course, as you get it close, just reconnect all your lights, your plugs, and also the cable for the door handle. Right, so that's the door card back in place now, and I've refitted the 4 Torx screws there. So next up, we can refit the wood trim. And the wee airbag logo. There we go. Okay, next up we're going to get in the boot here and reconnect the battery. And now the battery's reconnected, we can now bolt down the frame for the air compressor. And now we can put the spare wheel back. Alright, so that's everything back together now. So now it's time for the big test. Window goes up. Window goes down. Back up again. Sorted. Alright guys, so there we have it. That's that job sorted. Now you might find once you get everything back together and you turn the ignition on that you'll have an airbag light, especially if you've reconnected the battery while the airbag was disconnected. So if that is the case, you'll need a scan tool to reset the light. If you found the video interesting or useful, don't forget to give it a like, and make sure you go and check out the rest of my YouTube channel for more BMW DIY content. I'm MTech Guy. Thanks a lot for watching.